Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Joanne Butcher, and this is the Filmmaker's Life podcast. If you need to raise money to make your movie, you have come to the right place. And I always talk about the money side of filmmaking. And I'm really convinced that to be a successful filmmaker, that's a skill you're going to have to learn. And most filmmakers are like, no. But it really makes a difference when you can raise the money you need to make the films that you want to make. So that's why we're here today. And I'm going to be introducing to you Joshua Caldwell. And I had to be very careful to get that name right because I have a client called Joshua Calder. And I'm like, ah. So Josh, thank you so much for joining us today. I was super excited to meet you because, well, it's just very strange that you made this movie, Mending the Line, because I saw a piece about it on the news a couple of months ago. And I was like, oh my God, I have to see that movie. And then somehow, I think I was sick. I had the flu and somehow it just went straight out of my mind. And there are a few reasons for it. One, because of the topic, and that's why it was on the news. But the other was because I happen to be friends with Brian Cox's wife. And of course,
Nice.
I mean, I've been a big fan of his for many years. But so I was like, oh, got to see that film and got to see Brian Cox's latest movie. And then I completely forgot. And now here you are. And so I'm really happy to meet you.
Perfect. Kismet.
But what I would say is that on this particular conversation, and we'll get back to Mending the Line and being #1 on Netflix and blah, 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 blah. But for me, what I think is so illuminating for filmmakers is to learn how somebody made their first film and then how that moves them along. And I was very excited to see your films and see the trajectory, because I think it's kind of the dream trajectory that I can imagine any filmmaker would want to have, you know?
Yeah,
So
so far.
yeah, so far. So my first question always is, when did you first know that you were a filmmaker?
So I think I first knew that I was a filmmaker, or had a really intense desire to make films in probably high school. I had made something beforehand in 8th grade. We got, at the end of a communications class, we got to make a movie, right? And some people just did whatever. I was like, I had a short story that I'd written in 7th grade called Cheese is Good, which was this really stupid airplane-like comedy about a detective that was a block of cheese, and solved crimes, right? So um, people really liked it. It was really stupid and really funny.
I
And
like it already, and I haven't seen it.
I know, and nobody ever will. But it had that like airplane humor, like there's a problem in the cockpit. What's that? That's the little room in the front of the plane that used to steer the airplane. Things like that. And so in 8th grade, it was like, well, let's make this. Why don't we adapt this into a movie? And so we did. We shot it on VHS. I played the detective. I had a Wisconsin cheese head on and a trench coat, and I think the killer was a guinea pig. Um, but we did a lot of different stuff. I mean, because so I was shooting on VHS, but then I would shoot out of the back of a car with me on a little scooter, like doing action stuff, and then I would take like clips from The Rock the chase scene in the movie The Rock that was on VHS, and I would edit. I was doing like VCR to VCR editing, so it was all linear editing. But it was funny and it was ridiculous, and I was like, this is really cool. And then I got to high school and had made a couple like movies in Spanish class that were like, a hit, and people really seemed to like them. And again, really stupid comedy humor. But the really cool thing about my high school was that we had two things. One, we had a 2 period a day video production class where we got to use digital cameras. We had Avid editing systems. Like we got to really learn how to make movies and music videos and documentaries and news stories, whatever. So we had
Wow.
the equipment and the setting for it. But then my school also had a history of making these parody films for the ASB officers, which is like your student leadership, your president, vice president, things like that. And they would make these movies and show them to the entire school. And they'd be a parody of like, Blair Witch Project or like whatever. And I had a friend, I really wanted to participate and help make these movies, but I also had a friend that was doing it. And he was a year older, so he'd gotten into it sooner than I had. And I just said, I want to help out no matter what. And that led to me basically kind of becoming this video czar, position and making these films. And in my junior and senior year, we did like a Usual Suspects parody. We did a smash or a snatch style heist film. And then for my senior year, we did like a soap opera, which was like awesome because the worse the acting was, the better the soap opera was. Um, and then my grand finale in high school was this hour-long Star Wars movie
Wow.
that we spent like 4 months making. And I'm born and raised in Seattle, Washington, so like we would drive for 3 hours out to the desert to go shoot Tatooine, and then we would go to the ski slopes to shoot Hoth or whatever. And all these, by the way, I mean they're all terrible. They're shot on high eight.
So what kind of school was this?
It was a regular high school, Bellevue High School.
High school has a 2-hour video
I
production
know.
period.
And it was sort of an inter-district course. So kids would come from other schools.
Ah,
And it was just happenstance that they offered this, and then I got to take it. But then with the ASB movies, what was really cool was you got to go make a movie, and then
mm,
instead of like putting it up on YouTube or like showing your friends, I got to screen it in front of 1,200 kids.
yeah.
And it was so you got to sort of experience it with an audience, and you got to see what worked and what didn't. And of course these were dumb little movies, but that was sort of foundational. And as I was doing it, I was just like, this is what I want to do, like this is what I want to continue doing.
Um, the the idea of being able to do all of that in high school. I mean, I think about, I was on stage, I did drama, um, and all these different things, but I just can't imagine having that much time in video production. Although one of my friends, Jonathan Kane, who's a filmmaker now, I met him when he was about 14,
Mm,
and we're doing some sort of program at his high school that had a lot of video production already.
yeah.
So it may just be that we're different generations.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, this was late 90s, 98 to 2002. But it was high eight video cameras. Yeah, we had avid editing systems, but we didn't have any of the even an iPhone nowadays is so much better than that stuff was. And so but the training ground was not only filmmaking, like telling a story and shooting stuff, but some of my classmates were using like doing really complicated effects on After Effects. And I remember one of them, they basically recreated a video game world. So they shot him on a green screen, and then he built out like Mario World or whatever, like, and inserted himself into it. So people were really doing innovative stuff. But the thing about it was you didn't have any money. Like you had no money. So it was like, go figure it out. You're not worried about permits. You're not worried about insurance. You're just like, how do we do Star Wars? And how do we do lightsabers? And how do we do like the spaceships and the cockpits? Like how do we accomplish all that without having any money or any budget? And so it just got you really into that mindset of like, one, we have to do it. We got to get it done. We have a limited amount of time, and we got to figure out a way around it. So, that kind of like no budget, low budget approach was really instilled in me early on. And it just was something it didn't let me stop. It didn't stop me, it
Right.
didn't limit
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, because nobody ever said to you you were supposed to have money. So,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
And
you could.
you're going like, what's a dolly? And like, what is it? What's the clapboard for? I don't understand. How are we recording separate sound? Like, it's just like you're figuring all this out as you go along. And I think one of the really key foundational things for me was, this was right around the time when you had that massive explosion of the new DVD releases. But like, when they had a whole 2 discs of special features, and you could watch all this stuff and learn in a way that you couldn't. This was sort of pre-internet. You had some books, but they were books. They were static. They had an image, but it didn't really help you see how things worked. And, I remember watching the behind the scenes on Magnolia and being like, what's that? They were on like a Fisher dolly and being like, what is that thing? Like, I don't understand what that does, and then you're trying to build your own and figure out, well, how do they get those super smooth shots and all that kind of stuff. So there was just a lot of like, that was kind of what's cool is because you didn't really know and it wasn't easy to learn, you were forced to kind of figure it out yourself.
It's funny you mentioned about all this behind the scenes stuff that suddenly became available. There's on Netflix, there's a Oscar nominated, did they win? I don't think so. Society of the Snow, it's called.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
There's a behind the scenes documentary about it, and it's so cool because it's a $60 million movie.
Yeah.
And wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
How they're doing.
It's envious for sure.
Plane thing. We got 5 planes or something like that to shoot
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I remember
So,
watching like, you watch the behind the scenes of like Pearl Harbor, right? And you're just watching Michael Bay just blow up all these like, you're just like, man, that it's such a sandbox, and that's what kind of really got me excited, was watching all that stuff and seeing, wow, this is possible. This is a cool job. This is like what this stuff is, and then figuring out how to make a career of it.
I often feel as though when I have these conversations, and I'm asking this question of, well, when did you first know you were a filmmaker, that there's this part of the whole thing is that, oh, I get it that people make films. I mean, you started younger maybe than most, but I think that a lot of times it's when we see that behind the scenes stuff that we realize, oh yeah, people make movies. It's
Right.
not some entity
Does it just
out,
happen?
the government or something.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there was for me a real foundation even earlier, probably than that 7th, 8th grade video. Because I remember, I'm not sure when it was on, but on Discovery Channel, there used to be a show called Movie Magic. And they went behind, it was all about special effects. So like each episode one would be about model building, and they would show examples from like Under Siege 2, where they built the train, and then, they show that stuff. And then another one would be about animatronics, and they would show the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park and how they did all that. Another one would be like explosions, and they would show how they did the rockets from Apollo 13. Of course, this was on like broadcast television, so we had to you had to catch it, right? And so every time I knew it was on, I'd try and tape it, because I wanted to be able to go back and watch it. But it was kind of the first this was even pre-DVD, so it was really kind of the first real show or peek behind the curtain that wasn't, say, like a magazine or
Right.
something that you would get, about, because they used to put out the magazines about how Batman was made and things like that.
Yeah.
And so it was a real peak, and you're just like, that's what really drew me in, was the special effects of it all, even though I'm not really a special effects guy.
Right. That's not part of your work at all. But that's so interesting. I've never heard of that show. We'll have to find it. I bet
You can find them on YouTube. Yeah, if you
Yeah.
search Movie Magic Discovery, you can see the old shows, and they'd go into like
That's
Stan Winston's workshop, and yeah, it was very cool. It was a very cool
very nice.
show.
Very nice. That's a great lead. So you're in high school. Did you go to film school for college?
I did not. I
No?
applied. I did not get into a couple of the schools that I really wanted to go to. On the advice of my college counselor, he recommended I apply to this school in New York called Fordham University. And he had a previous client of his that, ended up going there. And he was a filmmaker and still is. He works in commercial, but he recommended, and I got in, and it was between that and Chapman University. And I thought about it, and I was like, I know I'm eventually going to come to LA. I don't know if I want to be so isolated down in Orange County with such an intense focus on film. I sort of felt, and I still feel, that if you want to be a writer or director, I don't know if film school is really the best place for you in this day and age. And I made a decision that the experience that I might gain living in New York City, because Fordham's campus was on the Upper West Side on West 60th Street, would give me something that would help contribute towards my writing and directing. Cause I really feel like really writing and directing, you can learn that, you can learn the actual things you need to know fairly quickly. It does not, I don't think it takes 4 years to teach you how to direct or how to write. The foundation is pretty quick, and it's really then just about experience and about practice. And
Gosh,
so,
I
yeah,
just love what you just said.
yeah,
I just
um,
love what you just said. I've met filmmakers who've said to me they need 4 years to write a script.
no,
And
you can learn to, I personally think you can learn what you need to know to write a script in one day.
yeah, I think so.
And after that, it's just doing it. It's doing it over and over and over again. I mean, and now you don't even have to know that much because there's programs that teach you how to format, and you just need to learn to do it. But more importantly, and this is what factored into my decision, I think you need stories to tell. And I don't think you're going to get stories to tell from film school. I think that what's going to happen is you're going to become this kind of referential. A lot of your early stuff's going to be referential to other movies. And I think
Mm,
there's only one filmmaker that does that really well, and that's Tarantino.
mm.
And everyone else is kind of a copycat. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
what a director and a writer needs is experience. They need life experience. They need to go out and live and have their heart broken and fall in love and whatever. And that's the stuff that's going to start feeding into your work. And so I thought Fordham would give me that, and just thought the experience of, I'd never been to New York City, the experience of living in New York City would be amazing for 4 years. And as it turns out, Fordham has a really stellar acting program.
Uh-huh.
And what's something that you could be the best director in the world, if you don't have actors,
Right.
that are great, what are you going to do? So I really benefited. So I just kept making movies. I made at least one short film every year,
Mhm.
and I started working with, I cast the actors that were at my school, and a lot of them have gone on to either have a lot of do a lot of work in the theater. A couple have gone on to movies. I didn't work with her, but Taylor Schilling from Orange is the New Black was in my class at Fordham. Michaela McManus, who's gone on to be in a lot of things. She was in a short that I did. And so a lot of actors really kind of, came out of that program, came out of those couple of years. And I benefited by having, I felt like figuring out how to make a movie is easy, but like getting the great performances, having scripts to write, stories to tell, that's the hard stuff. That's the stuff you got to go out and really find. And so, that was the big benefit. And then ultimately, my 4 years in New York got me my wife and got me an MTV Movie Award. So it was definitely well worth it.
Years ago, a friend of mine was in the first master's program in the film school at the University of Florida, which is in Tallahassee. And they had some like prefab buildings, it was very
Hmm.
rickety. And he ended up making a short film that ended up being executive produced into a feature by Quentin Tarantino. And
Oh, wow.
that was the first year of the program.
Yeah.
And since then, they now have this, fabulous film school, which is placed in the center of the building that's their football program, which is
Okay.
their big football school, right?
Yeah.
And they started winning the student Oscars, the Student
Right.
Academy Awards, like 20 years ago. And when I looked at their films, what it seemed to me was that at this particular school, there's a partnership between the film school, the theater department, and the sound department. So what was happening was USC and NYU, or the usual suspects that had been winning the awards before, I think they were filmmakers using their filmmaker friends as actors. And that
Uh-huh.
the University of Florida came along and they said, no, we're partnering these three departments.
Yeah.
And they had actors who were at a much higher level, and the sound was at a much higher level.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I really feel as though I've kind of lost touch, so I'm not sure if they're still always winning the student
Yeah.
academies.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, to me, what you're saying about having really good actors in your film, that's not necessarily the way that directors are thinking. I would have
Right.
thought it was obvious, but it's not.
Yeah. I know. Especially, for young filmmakers making shorts. And especially if you're not in, say, a hub like New York or LA, and you're trying to find actors, and maybe you don't have any money. But I think that's so key because one, that's really what directing is. It's not setting up the camera and choosing the shot, like all that. Yeah, you can do it, and I do it. But if you don't know how to work with actors and
Right.
really how to elicit great performances, it's just to quote, I think it was Seinfeld, it's like, that's a big old matzo ball hanging out there, and you can't really, there's nothing you can do, nothing you can do, you know,
Nothing.
and you become then ill prepared when you do get a great actor and you're like, I don't know what to do with you, Um, so I think that like to me, I've even said, for people starting out, one of the hardest things is finding material. And I remember this goes way back, but I remember I used to be on the IMDb like message boards. So if this sends you way back because they don't have them anymore, but there was like filmmaking, like a message board. It was people posting things they made and like, here's some advice. And I thought I never followed it, but like some of the best advice I ever got for young filmmakers who want to direct is go get a one act play. Edward Albee's The Zoo, Waiting for Godot, like whatever, something that's like a one act play with like two actors, and like go shoot it, like go make that movie. Don't worry about trying to get it out there or like what happens if it's good and I want to distribute it. Forget all that. Like you need to basically like remove the pressure of trying to come up with something brilliant as a writer. If you're not a writer, remove the pressure of trying to like, have it turn into something in your career, and instead
Right.
just like go make it and go have the experience of working with actors and figuring it out. For people who are not writers, I think that's one of the best things you can do to
That's
gain some experience. Because one, as a director, you got to have material to direct. You got to have something. So either you're creating it yourself or you're trying to source it from somewhere. And as a result, you don't really get much experience. So why not just like cut out the middleman, so to speak, of the material and use something that's good and has a lot of depth to it and something you can work off of, and bam, there you go. And then all of a sudden you get this experience and there's not a lot of pressure. What I found, the reason why I also did not like the idea of film school, um, and I've written articles about this and all this stuff, is like basically as a director, you are going to, in your undergraduate, say first 2 years, you're going to make a bunch of 1 minute long shorts, like maybe, and it's all going to be early theory and all that kind of stuff. And then your junior year, and maybe this has changed, but at the time for me, it was like your junior year you'd make a 10-minute color sync short. That was your whole project that junior year. And then your senior year, you would make your thesis project, 30 minutes. Maybe that's funded by the school. Maybe you got to fund it. Right. So, that's like what, 2 movies, 2 shorts, and you come out of college. What if both those suck? Right. Like Robert Rodriguez always said, everybody's got bad movies in them. You might as well get them out early, get them out quick, just make a bunch of stuff and get those done. And so rather than sort of limit myself to making these things that, I didn't think were making two things, I was like, I'm just going to make as many movies as I can. And some are going to be okay. And, some are going to be good. And some of them might suck, but nobody ever needs to see them. And I can just use it to gain experience. And I can just make them as cheaply as possible rather than sinking, say, $50,000 into a student short, and you're feeling that pressure of needing it to convert into something else.
Here's something that's happening now in film school. So a lot of people graduate from film school with 0 films. That's a common experience.
Mm,
Because let's say we're in a class and they pick your project.
right. Exactly. Exactly. It's like that.
I DP your project, but I don't
Right.
get, right? So people graduate with 0 films. And then the other thing is that one of my clients, his big dream, he's from Trinidad and I'm from Trinidad and my father's from Trinidad, and he wanted to go to film school in America. So he came to FSU and he went to make his thesis film, his master's thesis film, and he had worked with me. So he's like, okay, I'm going to start raising money. And they said, oh, no, you're not.
Right.
And it turns out, and this is common, the film school has a rule that says you can't raise money.
Mm,
He had to pay for that out of his own pocket, you
Yeah.
know, and any person in the school who was wealthy could spend whatever they wanted.
Right.
So it starts, even in film school, this incredibly unlevel playing field
Yeah. Yeah.
around that's
Right.
anyway.
Now,
My
my
bad.
exception, yeah. Now, my exception for film school is if
Mm,
you want to be a DP or an editor, because
okay.
one, those are fairly technical processes, like especially if you're a DP, there's color science and lenses. You want to be doing that in a classroom setting where you can fail, right? Same with editing. You don't want to be learning on the job, I don't think, in those situations. And so, but the other benefit is that you're going to go to film school. If you want to be a DP or an editor, you're going to be going to film school with everyone else who wants to be a director. So
Right.
now, well, you know what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll DP your short. I'll DP your short. I'll DP your short. That's what
Yeah.
Janusz Kaminski did. He shot like 200 shorts, or probably not that many, but like 50 shorts while he was at film school. And now you're getting to learn and gain experience on somebody else's dime,
Yes.
right? Because the
Yeah.
directors are all the ones that fund their project. They make one thing. Meanwhile, you as a DP or you as an editor, you can work on 5, 6 things a year. And so
Mhm.
there's tremendous benefit both from a, a sort of knowledge perspective on what you need to know as a DP or as an editor, but also the experience that you're going to gain. So that's my exception. If you want to be a DP or an editor, I think there is a tremendous benefit to a film school setting. But I think as the director, I don't know, I'm not sold on it.
In your case, I think you probably were imagining making a feature film from long before you made it. Is that the case?
Oh yeah, I felt at 23 that I hadn't made a feature yet and I was behind.
Right,
Yeah.
33, it's like, hello, catch up.
Yeah, I
Um,
tried to make one. We tried to make one. Me and my friends tried to make one the year after high school, in the summer between go and not good, not good.
what,
Bit off more than we could chew, and
uh,
it's like you're shooting on like a Canon. What was the G2 GL2 or whatever, and it still looks video-y and not quite right. And we had a lot of fun making it, but it didn't turn into anything, and I was clearly missing out on the experience.
right. So when you came to make your first feature, and now that I know that you teach a class around this, I think it's really great to be able to say you made your first feature for $6,000.
Yeah.
And what how did you get to that point? Did you just save up the money? Did you borrow it? Did you raise it? How did you find that money?
Yeah. So just to catch up, I graduated from college. 2 days later, I was standing on stage at the MTV Movie Awards,
Ah,
getting a golden popcorn right there. Um,
uh-huh.
I had submitted for and got nominated for an award they had called Best Film on Campus. And they only did it
Uh-huh.
for 3 years. And I was the first recipient. And I got nominated, and I was told, hey, you're one of the 2 finalists. So we're going to fly you out to LA. And then, we'll see who wins. I mean, I ended up winning. I thought that I was like, oh, Hollywood's
I've
doors are
made
open. I
I've
made it.
made it.
Just give me $50 million and I'll go use it to make a movie. That didn't happen. First of all, apparently, a lot of people don't watch the MTV Movie Awards, so they didn't see it. The other thing was when they sent out the press release of all the winners, they didn't put my name on it. They left my category off. So like it was this huge non-event that was also a huge event. Um, and I was a little bitter about it for a little while because I was like, this should have, I get it. Like you win Best Kiss, you're not suddenly, getting offers in Hollywood. But for me as a student filmmaker, I won a popular vote contest. I think
Yes,
it means something. And
right.
it's not that it didn't, but just nobody knew about it. And so I got a manager who was sort of a manager, and he was mostly doing
That's
talent.
that's
Um,
great.
yeah, I mean, it was a first step, but I learned a great lesson. The great lesson that I learned in this was that it doesn't matter what you accomplish. Nobody in Hollywood is going to do anything for you. Like
There
you've
is
got to do
no
it yourself.
on a white horse coming
Yeah. Yeah.
to
The
it.
cavalry is not coming, right? Um, Nobody's going to do it for you. If you're going to have a career, if you're going to be successful, it's going to be on you. right? And so I said, all right, I put the movie award under my bed, put it out of sight, and I started hustling. And that included doing music videos, commercials. But I really didn't want to be a music video director. This was also sort of right when YouTube was coming out. And so music video budgets were cratering and they didn't have the same, cultural cachet that they did in the 90s. And I was like, I
Right.
don't really want to spend 15 years being a music video director, working with $5,000 budgets to then maybe make a feature. Like, I want to be in this business, making features, writing features. So I took an internship, and one
Oh,
internship led to, I needed to get my foot in the door, and I was like, I'd rather work as a exec in this industry than not work in this industry at all. So let me get my foot in the door. Let me meet people. Let me make connections. And that first internship led to a job working for the creator of CSI, Anthony Zeiker. He
wow.
had a production company called Dare to Pass, and he was doing television, and then he was doing digital. This is in 2009, right? Kind of pre iPad. YouTube was just starting to become a thing. And I got to be involved on the digital side, which was really cool because I got to direct, I got to produce, I got to develop, I got to write, I got to involve myself in this space in a way that I would not have been able to had I been in in the TV side, right? Because
Yes.
TV side is so hierarchical, and it was like, forget it. So I got to just really be involved. And a lot of times, a lot of the stuff that I got to do as a director was like, here's a camera, here's a Canon 5D, go shoot something. Here's an actor. I'm like, okay. um, all
Do
right,
something.
let's figure it
Do
out. Go
something.
do something. And, no lights, no crew. I had to do it all myself. But and so during this time, just to back up for a second, during this time, I was also writing a lot of scripts, trying to get stuff made. And like the first script that we wrote, me and a writing partner of mine, we wrote in 2006, which is when I won the movie award. We were like, oh, we'll write something we can make for 1.5 million. Right. And we're like, that's what we're aiming for. And of course, at the time, didn't really have connections, didn't know people in Hollywood, had met some people, but they weren't going to make a $1.5 million movie. And the script maybe wasn't very good. We were sending it out too early, making a lot of mistakes, right? But we also had another script of ours that got, optioned, and then the strike hit, and that sort of changed the trajectory of that and made it more difficult. So we were getting some things that were saying, okay, you're headed in the right direction. But over the years, eventually working for Anthony, I always said, I want to make a feature. Like, I just had this arbitrary deadline of like, before I turn 30, I want to have made a feature. And the clock was ticking, and I found myself, what happening was we kept writing for smaller and smaller budgets, right? Like, okay, now we only need $500,000. Okay, now it's 200,000. And finally,
Just
my
stop before you get down to six, because
yeah,
I think it's really great, because that $1.5 million number, I think, is a place where so many filmmakers get stuck, and they
mhm,
just realize that that is not a reasonable number,
right,
you know.
especially as a
And
first-time filmmaker.
right, and I have clients making their first features at those numbers, and it's working, and that's fine. But for most people, that is not going to work.
Right.
And the example I always give is Barry Jenkins. And when I
Hmm.
say Jenkins, people say, "Oh yeah, Moonlight, that was his first
Yeah.
film." No, it wasn't.
Right.
His Oscar-winning film, Moonlight, at 1.5 million, was his second film. His
Yeah.
first film he made for $13,000, and
Yeah.
it to Sundance. So it's like, a lot of the reason I'm always talking to filmmakers about their first film is because people miss this piece, this
Right.
step, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, you might, obviously you're capable of making a $1.5 million movie, but maybe not back then.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that was definitely sort of something that you kind of look back and go, I don't know if I was ready. Um,
Mhm.
and just to point out, because listen, we'll get to my course, but advertise my course and talk about making a movie for $6,000. And I'm constantly having people tell me, you can't make a movie for $6,000. And I'm like, Nolan made his movie for $6,000 following. Obviously you can argue Robert Rodriguez made his for 7. You can say, well, not really, but whatever. Still 7,000 hard costs to get a movie in the can. There's numerous filmmakers that have done it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is people will say, well, you can't make a good movie for $6,000. And I said, why do you think that? Well, first of all, like having money is no guarantee of making a good movie.
No,
You know,
not at
like just because you have $100 million doesn't make you're going to make a good
all.
movie. The budget has nothing to do with it.
Mm-mm.
Now, yeah, there's a lot of crappy movies made for 5,000 or 6,000 or 10,000 or whatever. And, you know, you got to know how to do it. But, yeah, you're right. I mean, I sort of, you know, so we just started lowering the budget, trying to come up with projects with lower and lower budgets. And then I was starting to feel the push and I was like, well, we got to come up with something. And it was around this time that I had been reading about how Ed Burns was making these $10,000 features and shooting on a 5D. And I had been shooting on the 5D a lot. I saw how powerful it was in low light, in existing light. You could really get a beautiful image in a way that you just could not prior to that camera
Mm,
coming out.
mm.
You know, it was basically if you wanted cinematic, you had to shoot film or you had to shoot on the red, which was not great in low light. You know, and then prior to that, like you had maybe you were shooting on like GL2s and XL2s and the DVX 100 and like people don't understand like it took so long to get to the red and to get to like
Technology. Yeah,
23p
yeah,
that within the last 15 years it's so accelerated like you just take it for granted.
yeah.
But at that time the 5D was new and I just said, well, I think we could get $10,000. I could probably find $10,000 to make a movie. And my producing partner, you know, was like, yeah, like we could probably do that. Turns out we got six.
But
Um, but it was kind of all we needed. And then it was a matter of going, well, what's a story that we could write, that we could shoot for six? But the thing that I did not want to do, that I thought the mistake that gets made so often by filmmakers is that when they have a limited budget, they limit the scope of the story. And they go, I'm going to make a movie with two actors and we're going to be in one location. Yeah, one room, you know, or one
and they
location.
to each other.
Right. And then what happens is they then put all that money into crew and food and all this stuff that's not on screen. And as a result, your film, even though you might have had $200,000, your film looks cheap because clearly what's on screen, you didn't have the scope to pull it off. And I just said, well, $6,000 is basically no money. You know, it's basically
Right.
$0. So why are we letting, we're not going to be able to hire crew. We're not going to be able to have all this stuff. We're not going to be able to like do cranes and all this stuff. So like in a way it was very freeing. And we basically, I came up with this idea. I had this idea in my head about a woman stuck on a layover in LA. And, you know, I started developing that out and I was intrigued by the notion of making a foreign language film that was set in an American city. So that's what Layover is, 95% French language. It's a little bit of a nod to, you know, French New Wave, which was shooting just like I was, right? Like just,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, like, you know, you stage all your dialogue scenes inside and you shoot good sound and then you go out on the streets of Paris and you get all the big stuff, but there's no audio, you know, it's just whatever. Um, and
I say, you know, we planned, Emily and I did all this planning and we're going to show the trailer of Mending the Line, but I wish we're going to show the trailer instead
for
of
Layover.
Leo.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, that would have been a much
I think
smarter idea.
she might have just posted it, but
Link, but
yeah, I know.
to
Keep it in here.
yeah. So the thing that is really striking to me about watching Layover, is how big it opens.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how can that be a $6,000 film?
Right.
It opens big. It's a city. Is there a drone shot first? They didn't have drones
No,
back.
we're on a plane.
Oh, we're on the plane and we're
Yeah.
looking to the
We're
plane.
looking out. I shot out the window. Yeah.
Yes. So we're looking out of the plane window, and then we are in the airport, I think.
Yeah. We're in LAX.
We're in LAX, and I'm like, immediately, I'm just like, but how's he doing that?
Yeah.
Now, if I hadn't known the budget, I don't think
Right.
I would have been asking those questions.
Right.
I think I would have been perfectly happy thinking this was a much bigger budget project, and I'm in the airport and I'm following this woman, real nice, tight,
Right.
stops on her, walking through, just kind of, we're ambling along. But because of the production value,
Yeah.
I was really just very happy, just sort of going along. Then we get into the hotel room, which looks like a perfectly appropriate location for
Yeah.
gonna
Some
happen
boring nondescript.
but nice,
Yeah. Right.
nice
Nice. Yeah.
hotel room. And then the conversation begins, on the phone in French. And so my initial reaction was, but how is he doing this so big?
Yeah.
So that's
Right.
what you, I think.
So I crafted this story, right? And I'll come back to the opening in a second, but crafted this story of this young woman who's stuck on a layover for 12 hours overnight in LA. And she ends up going to visit a friend who's the only person she knows. And it creates this kind of like nighttime odyssey throughout LA at night. And, I knew with the 5D, we could shoot it all at night and we could, really capture the city in a beautiful way, very much influenced by like Collateral and what Michael Mann had done using digital cameras on that. And yeah, and so then I just started crafting the story and I just started thinking, well, what can we get away with? Like, what could we, and to your point, like I remember one of the things I remembered was, so in Chris Nolan's Following, which he made for $6,000, he starts the film on an interior stage and it's a dialogue scene and he shoots it on a dolly and it's really controlled and like really well shot, right? And then the rest of the movie's handheld on the streets of London. And I remember him saying on that, by intentionally starting on this well shot opening, everything that follows feels like a choice, not
Yes.
like it was your only choice. It feels like an intentional choice to shoot it in a specific way. And so
Yes.
feeding off of that, I said, well, if we start on an airplane and we shoot it in this way, everybody will think that we had money because how else do you get an airplane? Meanwhile,
Did you get LA is what
well, right.
how
So
you,
meanwhile, we just stole it. We just, we just
right.
shot. And so the airplane in the LAX was probably one of the cheaper elements. And what did I do? Well, I bought 2 tickets to San Francisco and me and the actress flew out of LAX. So we went to LAX during the day for our flight and I timed the flight. So it was when I was daytime and then nighttime returning. And we went to LAX. We shot the end of the film, which is all daytime LAX. And I shot, it's a technique that I didn't invent, but have given a name to, which is live environment filmmaking.
Uh-huh.
Great example of live environment filmmaking is oh shoot, now I'm blanking on the movie. Hang on, it'll come back to me.
You have a sports game, for example, and
Yeah,
you see the crowd and you hear the
right.
crowd and you see some players running around on the, but the scene is happening in the stands,
Yes.
something like that.
Basically, you have no control over what's going on around you. You only control what your camera is doing and what the actor's doing. And so that's how we did it. We basically, and we shot in LAX. And of course, I'm thinking somebody's going to catch us, right? Like I've got this
Yes,
camera out, but what I was going to say, if anybody asked me, they were like, "What are you filming?" I'm like, "Oh, my
my wife.
girlfriend and I we're travel vloggers." And then they'd be like, "Okay, you just can't film." And I'm like, "Okay, sorry about that." You know, because it was just this little 5D. Like people still hadn't really clued in that you might be filming a movie if you had a 5D. They would just assume you're taking pictures,
Yeah, but body traveling is taking pictures. So
Right,
what?
right. Yeah, exactly. And so exactly, like nowadays it's even easier because everyone's
Yes,
got a camera.
yes,
Everyone's filming stuff, right? People are making TikToks and Instagram videos and all kinds of stuff. So it's almost even easier now. But utilizing live environment filmmaking is how we shot so much of Layover. So so then we flew back from San Francisco and I just rolled all the time, right? But the other thing, and this was a big part of it, was I wrote it to accomplish that. I
Mhm.
wrote it to be designed for live environment filmmaking. So whatever we would get, we would get. So in that opening 3-4 minutes from when she's on the plane to when she gets to the hotel, there is only one minor story point that we needed to accomplish, which was her looking up at the board and looking confused.
Uh-huh.
Then when we're in the hotel, you get the information that, oh, my flight was canceled. I guess I'm stuck here for 12 hours. Right. So it doesn't look like she just walks with purpose. And then it's like, we just had that one moment where she's looking at her flight, she's looking at her ticket, she doesn't know what to do. And then it cuts and she's on the thing and she's going and we're on with the story. And then we fill you in 2 minutes anyway when we're in the hotel.
Right.
So it was it was basically, I call it, I did, you know, in my course, I talk about it as modular storytelling. And the way I think about that is, you know, when you have a camera, really to film an image, you need your camera body and your lens. That's it, right?
Mhm.
That's your basic, what you need to tell that story. You can add all these other things onto it, monitors and follow focus and map boxes and all these things. But if you take all that away, you can still film, you can still make an image. Same with modular storytelling. And modular storytelling is crafting a scene where your dialogue is conveying your story, or your action is conveying the story, and everything else is inconsequential. You know, people walking by in the camera, where she is in LAX, what kind of house she's in. I don't even write that description. I'm just like a house, and then we'll find it, and we'll find whatever house works. Because if you start writing in, you know, she comes down the long winding staircase, and that becomes a very intentional thing that you need for the story, you got to go find a house with a long winding staircase, right?
Yes.
Perfect example of this was the show that I did after Layover, and it was set in Miami. We were down in Miami for a couple months shooting, and it was a Hulu show. But the point is, like, we were putting it together, and the producer was like, "Why are we spending all this money? And why is this so much? You just made a movie for $6,000." And I go, you crafted a story that's about rich people.
Uh-huh.
You
Right.
need to show them as rich, and you need to have them in nice offices and nice houses wearing nice clothing. Like, that's integral to the story. Like, you have to put that in. And if you don't, your audience is going to go, these guys don't look rich. What are you talking about? When you have a line of dialogue that says, oh, it's the most popular nightclub in Miami, you can't have scenes where 20 people are standing around dancing. It doesn't work. So that's an example of something that is ingrained in the DNA of the story you're telling, and thus you can't skirt around it. But if you can not ingrain that, like with our character in Layover, there's no sense of how much money she has. There's no sense of like what her lifestyle is. There's no requirement, you know, that she stay in a super nice hotel or have a nice car or have expensive clothing or rings. You know, it's like we got all that out, and we stripped it down to its basic core storytelling. And as a result, if we, hey, got a nice car or found a house, you know, we had a lot of people show up for a house party. Hey, like, we'll use it, but it's not, you don't need it to make the film. Um,
I have to say, Josh, that I have completely messed up on time because I've been having way too much fun. And I wanted to go through all the steps where you made next a bigger budget movie, then a bigger budget movie, and then getting to Mending the Line. So
I
I
can
only have,
fly through it really quick if you want.
please,
All
because
right.
I was hoping you would say that because it's totally my fault. So
No, it's okay. And I'm not, I don't know if you're constricted on time, but I'm not. So if we go over, it's fine. So Layover, I made Layover, made it for $6,000, edited it, got it out. We premiered it at the Seattle International Film Festival, and everything kind of, it didn't blow up. It wasn't some like huge Sundance sale. We didn't even sell it. But we premiered it to a couple sold out shows, and some key people wrote about it.
mhm.
And then we decided to do a self-distribute model, and we a couple months later released it ourselves. But the thing we did was we hired a PR agent, and we had him target industry trades, right? Like, so the rap and slash film and all these kind of trades, because I knew my target audience was not some guy in Oklahoma. It was people in Hollywood. And so the thing is, I thought the movie would be popular because I had made a French movie and it was interesting and different. Instead, everybody just was enamored by the idea I had made it for $6,000. So that caught on. So as a result of that movie, I got my next two projects sort of directly as a result. One of which was the Hulu series I mentioned. The other one was this movie called Be Somebody. Now, both of these movies had much bigger budgets, probably more around 1 million to 1.5 million. At the same time, we shot Layover in 11 days. We didn't really need more, but I got to shoot a lot because we weren't spending time lighting, and I didn't have a big crew. And so we'd shoot for 8 hours, and I'd shoot for 7 of those 8 hours rolling. These other two projects were very frustrating because even though I had way more money, now I only had, 15 days to shoot one of them and 10 days to shoot another one. And I'm
Oh,
like, I don't enjoy this. This is not, I don't feel like we're setting ourselves up to make something good. So as a result of that, I did my third film, Negative, which is a spy thriller, and it was shot for $100,000. And I kind of went and said, I only want $100,000. Give me so little money, you're not even gonna know it's gone. Let me just go make this in the way that I wanted to make it. As a result, we were able to shoot for like 37 days on Negative, and spread out over like months,
Wow.
and we'd shoot for a week, and then we'd go down for 2 weeks, and then we'd get up, or we'd be like, hey, I want to go get the shot downtown. And the actors were like, okay, cool, let's go do it. So as a result, Negative has a lot of scope too. We're in LA, up into the desert, down into Arizona, yeah, a lot of scale and scope, and made for only $100,000. And so I would say, like, in that case, probably 80% of the movie was shot for 20% of that budget, and the remaining 20% was shot for 80% of the budget. So we adjusted our budget. It wasn't like the same amount every day. And that movie was made with basically 80% of that movie was shot with 4 people, and not including the actors. And then we'd scale up for the fight scenes or for the shootouts, or like, anything complicated that required stunts or anything like that. And so I made Negative, and then Negative came out, and then I'd written this script called, at the time it was called Southland, but it came to be called Infamous. And as a result, to be somebody, I got signed to CAA. I gave Infamous to, and they set me up with producers, and eventually we connected with a couple producers, said, we want to make this movie. And who do you want? And so then we went to Bella Thorne, got Bella Thorne on board. She brought in the financing. The budget of that film ended up being about 1.7 or 1.8 gross. And then we got, the tax credit back, and made Infamous. And then Infamous got bought by Vertical, and came out right during COVID, which was a challenge, but we ended up doing like a 60 screen drive-in movie theater release. And
Wow.
yeah, and so that was cool. It was kind of unfortunate timing in terms of when it came out. But it did well enough. And then about I don't know, sort of later that year, Mending Line came across my desk. And then I signed on and started, making it. And what was interesting was just because of financing and money, Infamous was done through sort of a foreign pre-sale type of deal. Mending Line was kind of pure equity. We didn't really go through foreign sales. It was sort of a challenging movie on paper. It's very Americana. It's a drama. But the result of that, as you may know, is that with foreign pre-sales, you kind of have your list of actors that have value, and you got to pick off that list. Whereas with Mending Line, because we had investors that were not concerned about making their money back, really wanted this story to be brought to screen in the best way possible. We got to pick actors that really fit the roles. And so that's how we got, we made an offer. We got Brian, we got Sinqua, we got Wes, Perry, and Patricia.
Shall we take a moment to show the trailer, or?
Sure.
All right, let's show the trailer, and then we'll just run a few minutes over today. And I think everybody's on tenterhooks. So go ahead, Emily. Thank you.
Now, you saw the Warno. Got one more trip out the wire. We're all gonna go home tomorrow.
The tour's over.
Still Marines, Vax.
Where'd everybody go?
Easy! Wait, no!
It's not easy what you've been through. But the important thing now is to heal.
What the hell is this world gonna want from me now?
You ever been fly fishing?
Fly fishing.
I think it could be good for you. Go there.
Ike Fletcher, right?
This is going to be good. It ain't easy. Takes practice. Do your recon. If you want to tap out, be my guest.
You've taken to it pretty hard.
Yeah. I like it.
Got it.
That's a bit of a thing around here.
I've noticed a few things around here.
I know the feeling. I lost my fiance.
So who's the kid?
Some VA sob story.
Then you two should get along great then.
I guess sometimes surviving is your punishment. So I stand in the river, and as the water rushed past me, I knew it was washing my burdens behind me.
You know, I doesn't watch TV, doesn't listen to music. Fishing, that's all he's done.
Does it ever get any easier?
Nope. But this is the place for me. The most important part of fly fishing, humility.
When I was out there on that water, I didn't think about anything else.
You went to war, you survived. If you're gonna fish, don't do it alone.
Figure out what it is you're willing to live for.
In the book of every soldier's life, the military is a chapter. It's not the whole story. Now that's done, let's go fishing.
Woo!
I hope that gives everybody a flavor. I have so many questions. So was this written by a veteran?
It was not.
Oh, it was not. Okay.
Not, yeah. Well, Stephen Camilio, his father was a veteran and fought in Vietnam. And his father, sort of in the mid to late 2000s, ended up he had cancer as a result of Agent Orange exposure during Vietnam. And as his father was dying, Stephen found himself sort of fly fishing as a way of processing his grief and dealing with that. And he started crafting the story, and then he eventually heard about organizations like Warriors in Quiet Waters and Project Healing Waters that were taking veterans out and showing them how to fish as a way of healing, and crafted this story. And I came onto it completely by chance. Like, I'm a fly fisherman. I'd been actually researching. Yeah, I'd actually been researching PTSD and veterans returning for like other projects. So like this kind of, when I told people about it, they're like, was this your idea? I'm like, I had nothing to do with it. But total happenstance, as sometimes these things go. Basically, one of our producers, Kelly McKendry, came on board the project and started calling everybody that she could who had made movies in Montana, just to say, what's the landscape? What's the process? What's the tax credit, et cetera, et cetera. She'd call my manager, because years prior to this, my manager produced a film that was set in Montana, but did not shoot in Montana. And he said, but what's the movie? And she told him, and he said, I've got a director for you. Can I send it to him? She said, yes. He sent me the script. I said, I've got to do this. And I pitched on it, and they brought me on board. But just in those weird things, like, had my producer years ago not made that movie,
Right.
I probably wouldn't.
Shot in Montana.
Never would have happened. I wouldn't have been probably involved. Yeah.
My other thing about this film is I lived in Montana. I escaped COVID in Montana.
Whereabouts?
Not in Livingston. I don't know. Did you actually shoot in Livingston?
We shot in Livingston and Bozeman, and then down in Paradise Valley.
Okay, so
yeah,
not place but I was so taken with Montana. I actually want to live there.
Yeah,
and partly it's the rivers.
Yes,
and I've never been attracted to fly fishing, but I remember sort of meeting at a film festival in Bozeman actually, and meeting these wonderful producers and these women, and then they started talking about fly fishing and about flies and making. It was just like I was just standing back watching, just like, wow.
Yeah.
But the film is so incredibly profound about healing, about PTSD, about the way that human beings cope in the worst ways possible, and even when they're given help, they're like,
right.
all of that.
Yeah.
It was just so good, so moving.
Thank
so
you.
Done.
And a lot of that was really born out of, I came into this project. I mean, I do this on every movie, but I came onto this one in particular going, we really need to get this right. We need to get the fly fishing right and correct and portrayed correctly on screen. We need to get the portrayal of veterans and PTSD correct. We need to get the portrayal of the VA correct, the process that you go through. You know, because if we don't, well, those are your two, you know, veterans, active duty and fly fishermen. That's your audience. So if you don't get that stuff right, they're not going to buy into it.
Right.
So we really, you know, it was a it was a lot of research. It was a lot of talking to people, which was the best part about the whole thing. You know, you get, when you have a real budget, you can be supported in that early pre-production stage of meeting people and talking to them and hearing their story. I mean, there's so many things in this movie that were literally things like lines of dialogue that people said directly to me. And I was like, that's got to go in the thing. And so, and then the other really cool thing about it was not only do we have a lot of buy-in from a lot of fly fishing companies and things like that, but in terms of the opening part of the film and throughout, but we also partnered with the U.S. Marine Corps, their entertainment liaison office. So in the same way that Top Gun partners with the Navy and they get to go on the carriers and shoot stuff, same with us. So basically that opening scene we shot at Camp Pendleton, all the trucks, the Marines, all that stuff was provided to us for free
Wow.
in partnership with the Marines. And they also provided a lot of, like, you know, technical advisement and reading the rest of the script and how would you do this and that kind of stuff. And so this was really a story, really born out of a desire to tell this story accurately, to do honor to these men and women and the sacrifices they had made, you know, as a result of being, you know, Marine or in any other branch of the military.
Somebody just jumped on who I suspect has the time wrong, and I'm just wondering if it's Alison Whitmer. If it's Alison Whitmer, please raise your hand or something and just let us know.
So cool. We'll start from the beginning.
Yeah, we'll have you come on and say hello.
Just do it again. I can do take two. It's fine. I'm used to it.
We'll start again. But if it is Alison, I think Alison maybe has two L's in her name, so it's maybe not her, but I just thought it might be her, who's the film commissioner from Montana.
Oh, nice.
But, oh, so you didn't know Alison Whitmer then?
No, well, no, sorry. The name just didn't click with me. It was, sorry.
Yeah.
I think I met her once, I believe, once or twice.
I think
we went to dinner when I was there scouting. Yeah. You know, and just in terms of the, you know, as you say, the growth and the changes, like, you know, a lot of the early stuff I did in Layover and things like that were so helpful as you grow. I mean, I did Infamous as a road movie. You know, we shot that in 20 days, 19 days or something like that. And, you know, but I knew in my head, I'm like, this is how we can do it because I've done it. And even though we have a crew and, you know, stuff like that, like there's still a way to do this. I think that if I was making my first feature for 1.7 million and ended up having the experience I had on Infamous, it'd be a completely different story. Like movie would not have come together in the way that it needed to. You know, even stuff with Mending the Line. I mean, you know, just having money does not solve all your problems. We experienced a really big issue on Mending the Line. We started production, we shot our first 3 days, then we went into a weekend, and we're in Montana, summer 2021, massive drought. You'd get a rainstorm coming through, you know, a thunderstorm coming through in the evenings, but that was it. There's no rain. And heading into that weekend, we realized that the following week, when we were supposed to shoot all our stuff on the rivers, all the outdoor stuff, it was going to be a week straight of rain, this massive rainstorm coming through. And I was like, you know, fishing in the rain's pretty epic, but we got to show the beauty of Montana. We got to move everything around. And fortunately I had producers and I had a team of people that really worked to make that happen. But our sort of best laid plan of like the perfect, you know, here's where the trucks are going to be over this night and we'll sit here, all that went out the window. And we were jumping back and forth in a way that, like, you know, I think that if I had been trying to do this as my first thing, I would have been totally overwhelmed. Instead, much of what my work as a filmmaker and, you know, director and a producer was sitting down there saying, how can we change these scenes? Can we move this scene to this scene? Can we, you know, even thinking logistically, well, if we put these two scenes together, that's a shorter travel day than on this day, you know? And so at the end of a long shooting day, I'd go home and I'd look at the schedule and I'd try to say, here's where we move stuff and here's where we need to change stuff. You know, and so, but all of that, all the early stuff gave me that confidence to build into bigger budgets in ways that, like, you know, it's tough when you're starting out because used to be 1.5 million would get you quite a bit. I mean, you know, look at Reservoir Dogs, right? Nowadays it gets you 15 days maybe. And it's tough to make a movie in 15 days if you don't really have that experience.
So what I see in this movie is that the writing, the directing, you working with the Marine Corps, everything is so very authentic. I mean, I don't know a better.
Oh yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. But how do you make a truly moving and authentic movie like that, and it gets to #1 on Netflix? What?
Your guess is as good as mine.
Really?
Yeah, I think that was a huge surprise, but I really believe from the beginning that there was an audience for this. It's just about getting to them. So the movie itself, we came out in theaters last June, right before Indy, Indy 5, and so we were really poised to just make a lot of money. But it came out, and it was distributed by Blue Fox Entertainment, which is a smaller distributor. So as a result, even though we were in like 400 theaters, we didn't really have a big enough marketing plan and budget to really support being in 400 theaters. As you know, marketing is key, and you just really got to get people's attention. So even people were like, I had no idea this came out.
Right.
So it didn't do great business at the box office. And then in the fall, it came out on VOD. Apple, Sony Pictures basically bought the home video rights to the film worldwide, which was very exciting. But again, it comes out on VOD. You either have to buy it or you got to rent it. And I think today, very few people are doing that. Certainly with these movies, maybe you'll buy some big movie like Mission Impossible or something like that, or Barbie, but I don't know if you're buying smaller independent films. So again, kind of DOA has made some money. People have found it. And then in March, we found out it was going to be on Netflix a couple days before it was supposed to launch. And it came out, and the first day we were out, we were #6, and then we spent the next 5 days at #1. And I mean, it's the algorithm, I guess. What was really amazing about it, and again, sort of supports my theory that there was an audience for this. I was looking at sort of Yellowstone as a comp, right? They had all this data on how Yellowstone is Montana down to Arizona and then over to Florida. And it's the #1 show on television. There's 14 million people watching each episode of Yellowstone when it was on. By far the biggest show. Beat Succession by 12 million viewers. Nobody was ever talking about it. Nobody was writing about it. None of the news, none of the entertainment mags were writing about it. They finally caught up on season 5.
Because I lived in Missoula, and they were always shooting down.
Yeah, right.
They're shooting up there. I better go watch this show.
So there's an audience for, call them red state, whatever you want, but there's an audience that, was poised for this type of film. Right. And just about getting to them. And I think it was a big part of that. I'm not privy to sort of Netflix's algorithm and how they got it in front of certain people, but it is kind of what's interesting about streamers, which is like, if you can be pushed by Netflix at the beginning, that algorithm just kind of kicks in and it feeds on itself. But what was really remarkable to me, and really shows, I think, the power of the film and the way audiences are responding to it and the need for a film like this, was not only were we #1 on Netflix in the US, we were only available in the US. It has not come out on streaming worldwide yet, but we made the top 10 global. We were #10 on the Netflix global top 10 list, despite the fact that we were only available in one country. Wow. And so we beat out other films that are available worldwide. So that's how many views we got. And so I think it really shows, a desire for people to see movies like this, and hopefully it lends itself to seeing more.
I have another theory, which we'll see what you think. But there's the Brian Cox.
Yes,
effect.
That's a huge part of it, which we didn't even talk about.
But the other thing is that Yellowstone, written by Taylor Sheridan, I have become a Taylor Sheridan fangirl like crazy. And I believe Taylor Sheridan is the best writer on toxic masculinity that has ever existed.
Right.
And but he's able to write about toxic masculinity from a very loving place.
Yes.
So he's writing about the kind of worst impulses, but he can have a lot of empathy. Right. And all of those people, as you said, from Montana down to Arizona across the border, are all watching the most subversive writing
Yes. Which is
about
what's
math
fascinating about it. Yeah.
that exists.
Yeah.
And then your film, it's a similar, like the I had just watched this stupid Jason Statham movie, but I just watch things sometimes because I'm trying to.
Why not? Yeah. See what's
And
see what's out there.
the level of racist language and homophobic language, and it's supposed to be, oh, this is the way these kind of men talk, but it was horrible. It was hate.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas in your film, these men who are so broken by that toxic masculinity get to go on a journey to find a deeper part of themselves and to heal. And it's so rich looking at that same topic, but it's presented in a way that I think all of those people can enjoy and embrace. It's not coming from a place of criticizing.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
That's
yeah, I'd buy into that for sure. I think that, you know, it's also that, you know, so many people out there are experiencing trauma.
Yeah.
And the movie itself kind of acts like my intention as a director was to really take you through Coulter's trauma, have you experience the same thing he's experiencing. So, you know, for example, with that opening, the opening gunfight, that was all it was not actually shot in one take, but it was made to look like it was one take, because what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to let the audience off the hook. I wanted to lock them into Coulter's experience and not give them the cut that's going to release the tension, that's going to allow them to remember it's a movie, right? So you're kind of thrust into this really chaotic environment. And then the rest of the movie kind of literally flows like a river. There's rapids and there's intense moments. And then there's really languid pools of quiet and calm. And so by the end of the movie, you've kind of been taken on the same journey that Coulter's been on. Because I really believe throughout all my movies, I've always, as a filmmaker, been really drawn to the subjective point of view within a film. I really am not an objective filmmaker where it's a sit back and observe. I really use the camera to try to underscore what's happening with the main character and tap into the psychological experience so that you can share that with the audience. So as an example, in Mending the Line, specifically Coulter's journey, a lot of his rougher times were shooting handheld, right? So as Coulter is off balance, the viewer is off balance. And as things calm down for him and get better, we shoot this. Sometimes it may be handheld just because we had to do it, but it was like, it's much smoother, it's more still, you know, and then it kind of weaves through that. So like, that's an example of how we try to like underscore the character's psychology with camera work. So as the subjective experience, I want to engage the audience. I want to engage the audience to go on that journey with you in the same way I did on Layover. Layover, we are locked into Simone's shoulder. We're either on her, over her shoulder. But for example, if a character that is not Simone, if we're in a dialogue scene, I shot the character as I would on like a 35mm lens. If that character walked away, the camera would not move with that character. We would zoom in, which allowed us to create this feeling that you're always connected with Simone.
Yes.
And you're not sort of just objectively experiencing the world with everyone else as well. So that's always exciting me. So I'm often looking for projects that can support that kind of approach, as opposed to a sort of more, you know, just a documentarian type of storytelling.
Well, I've broken all of my Filmmaker's Life rules.
I love it. Why not?
If somebody has a question, please raise your digital hand or raise your physical hand. And let's also have you tell us about your class before we take a couple of questions.
Sure. As those questions are coming in, but basically, so, you know, had been asked over the years, podcasts, interviews, people were always like, how did you make Layover? I don't understand how you made Layover. And so finally I said, well, why don't I put a course together? Why don't I help teach filmmakers how to make something like Layover? Because it's not something that's taught. Film schools teach you how to make things with money, with a budget, with a big crew, and very few filmmakers ever find themselves with that early on, especially when they're making things and trying to get things going. And so you know, I put together a course called 6K Filmmaker, and you can get it at 6kfilmmaker.com. And I'm actually going to provide anybody here or any of your clients or anything with a 20% off coupon. But it's really designed towards somebody who kind of knows what they're doing with filmmaking. It's not a filmmaking 101. Like, you kind of have to know what you're doing, but really trying to just break the conventional thinking of what you need to make a movie. And teach you how to make a movie for as little money as you can get, you know? And so it's been really great. It actually have hundreds of students that have signed up. A lot of them now are starting to make their films. I had one student that made a $10,000 Bigfoot feature, that I sort of helped, you know, get going. I've had another filmmaker who's in his, like, you know, 70s. He just made his first, like a short that he had been really focused on. And now you're starting to see other ones making features, which is really, really cool and exciting, and using a lot of these techniques. And so I take you through like soup to nuts. I start with, you know, so a big part of it is mindset. I talk to you about sort of the mindset of a filmmaker, the mindset of like approaching these kinds of projects, take you through writing the scripts designed to be done for no money, you know, production, cinematography, how to do stuff on your own, you know, sound recording, getting good at sound recording, and how you can accomplish this stuff in ways that a lot of people will tell you that you can't. You know, how to structure, how to get crew when you need them, right? Like, I don't really advocate for you going and saying, hey, cinematographer, do you want to come work for 2 weeks for free for me? You know, if you don't know them, like, you got to kind of, I say, you got to create your filmmaking family. Like, you know, who are those group of people that you can say, let's go make a feature together? Like, you run camera, you run sound, we're all producers. We'll all share in whatever benefit there, you know, all the profits of it, if there are any. So I really just, a lot of it is just inverting this thinking that most people have, that one, I need millions of dollars to make a movie. And that, because I find that, like, as a result, to your point, very early on, as a result, people don't get, their stories don't end up being told because they think they need so much money, and they miss out on an opportunity. And I think if you can get a $10,000 movie made or a $20,000 movie made, why not? I teach you how to work with SAG with these budgets. And so I, you know, it's a very, very comprehensive course. I've had a lot of great reviews from it. People seem to really enjoy it, and they really appreciate sort of the insight. You get access to me through the Facebook group, and I'm constantly asking questions or answering questions and giving feedback and things like that. So, if you guys, hopefully the code works, it should happen after midnight tonight. If it doesn't, you can email me at josh@6kfilmmaker.com, and I'll get you all set up. But, yeah, so that's the course.
So, you know, you did such a great job of explaining your course, and I've been doing this for a long time, and I never do a good job of explaining my course, but I'm going to, because I really think that we make a great team. And what I do with my clients is I teach them how to raise money.
Right.
And there are several different ways of raising
Which
money.
you don't learn in film school. There's a common theme there.
Film school. And I just published this book, which is about my work. It's about fundraising, getting your film funded, produced, and distributed globally. So my first book just came out, and everything I do is about the money side of things, because the way I see it is that filmmakers are so obsessed with the script and the writing and the editing and the directing and the acting, and they're not thinking about money in the business. And so I feel as though if I can get clients to shift 1 or 2% over to thinking about the writing, it actually balances everything out. And they're often afraid because they think, well, if I think about the money, then I mean, I've had people yell at me, you know, it's not only about the money. And I was like,
right.
Wait, did I say that? You know?
Right.
Did I say it was only about the money? Did I say it was not about excellence? Did I say any of those things? I don't think I did. But once filmmakers can raise money, and I usually start them at a minimum of 40,000 for a feature, 12,000 for a short, and then we have people up to, you know, millions. But and I've had people who've made feature films with me who've never made a film, never been on a set, nothing. But I show them to be a producer, raise the money, hire the people who know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, we make a great team.
Yeah. And I think it is important, because I think that, like, I mean, I found myself, I'll tell you this, like, in the last 10 years since I've been directing full time, I started directing full time in 2013. So in the last 11 years, I have been on set directing 120 days.
Oh.
All in, right?
Mhm.
Between all my features.
Mhm.
Not a lot of time on set doing the artistic stuff.
Yeah.
All the other time is fundraising, development, trying to get actors, right? Like pitching actors, like, and so one of the things I found that as I've gotten into, as I moved into doing the stuff with Infamous and doing the stuff with Mending the Line, I found not just a need, but a desire to be much more involved in the financing side of things. Because one, protects you from getting screwed to know what's going on. But two, you in the independent space, you kind of have to be. It's a very rare that you just find a producer who's like, I'm just going to go take care of it and I'll come back to you with money. Even if that's the case, you being able to have a voice and having an understanding of like, well, where's this money coming from? What strings are attached? Like, oh, do I now have to like put an actor in that's paid to be in the film? Because that stuff goes on all the time. I've had to deal with it. You know, people are buying roles for children and for themselves, and they're not actors and they're not good. And, you know, now you've got a not good actor in your film that you can't cut out because your financing is dependent on it. And so, you know, I think that like at the end of the day, it also gives you a level of control that you don't get if you're dependent on other people going out and raising money for you. One of the hardest things about being a director specifically, kind of like being an actor, is you can't really just like sit around and direct in your apartment. Right. You need permission, whether that permission is from yourself or somebody else, but you need something to shoot. And so having a way of being in control of creating financing opportunities and having an understanding of how those financing opportunities work, that's going to give you the ability as a director to get out and be directing more. So I think it's very, very important. And like I said, you know, they don't teach that in film school, you know, and where do people learn it nowadays? So
And it's so great when my clients learn how to raise money and all the other business stuff comes up, you know, the entertainment lawyers and all the different pieces, and they realize, oh wait, I need to know all of this.
Yeah.
You know, not anymore like, oh my God, I don't want to touch this. It's more like, no, I need to know all of this.
Yeah.
And I will grow in my knowledge as I make films. So I'm thrilled to have you say that. So we're way over, but does anybody have a question? I'd like you to raise your physical hand or your digital hand. And Mike, go ahead.
Joanne, great discussion. Joshua, congratulations on everything you've done. This has been a great talk, inspiring. I am been asked to direct a short set in Camp Pendleton. And I wondered if you would offer a suggestion on where do I start in terms of securing those 2 free days that I need.
Yeah. So the place to start is with the U.S. Marine Corps Entertainment Liaison Office. And it's an office staffed with Marines, and it's dedicated towards working with filmmakers to help, you know, projects get made. I don't know for sure how it works with shorts or anything like that, but that's the place to start. Contact them and they'll give you info on what it might be, what it might look like, what are the parameters and requirements around it, things like that.
Never knew they existed. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Excellent.
Thanks, Mike. Reno.
Hey, this is a great discussion, so I appreciate your time and your story. I have a film that I'm going to be shooting in July, and it's a feature film. It'll be my first.
There you go. Congrats.
Yeah, thanks. See what happens. The part of the conversation that kind of piqued my interest was the live environment.
Yeah.
Talk. And in your experience, were there any complications with SAG or the union on that kind of shooting?
No, SAG never bothered us. I mean, especially on low budget stuff, like as long as you're honestly with SAG, as long as you pay your actors and you pay P&H, they could care less.
I see.
Make sure you pay the P&H, then they do care if you don't pay into that. But no, I've never had an issue, and there's no stipulations in any of the contracts that really like lend itself to that. And really, like, you know, again, I'm not a lawyer, right? So I always say check with the lawyer. But in my experience, people will say, well, what about, don't you need permits? Don't you need all this stuff? And like, it depends. Is it you and an actor with a camera, or is it 50 people standing around and blocking traffic? Like those are two very different scenarios. And so one of the things I say is that what a permit gives you is it gives you permission to be in that space at that moment or on that day and to shoot. It doesn't have anything to do with distribution. Nobody will ever ask you if you had permits. You can't really get a location agreement for a public space, right? Like they're not going to really give that to you. So it's really like if the cops come around and say, "What are you shooting?" You're like, "I got a permit." And they're like, "Oh, okay." Like point in fact, in New
Yeah.
York,
Mm-hmm.
there are no permit requirements if you have a minimum amount of crew and you're not putting anything down on the sidewalk. They're like, "Don't even bother us. Like, just go shoot it." Right. So, and then you say, "Well, what about all the people in the area and around?" Well, people don't have a right to privacy in a public space. So, when I shot Layover and when I shot these other things, what I really tried to do was either shoot big wide shots, or you keep the focus on your actor and everybody else kind of falls out of focus. You don't ever really see them. You don't really ever, you're not focused on somebody. You're not making disparaging comments about somebody. It's just like somebody in the background and passing. And by the way, you say, well, how does somebody work with footage that's been shot live environment, whether or not you have a permit? Well, a great example of a big movie doing live environment is in the third Bourne movie. Paul Greengrass shot in Waterloo, and basically they would not let them shoot down that train station. So what they had to do was they basically had Matt Damon, they surrounded him with some extras, but then everybody else in that scene are all just real people walking through. So, they didn't get permission. Maybe they had a placard out, that said we're filming, but that's not really a legally binding thing. And nobody can really sue you because what is their cause?
Mm-hmm.
So funny that that's a plot point in one of your movies.
In mine?
Yeah, she shows up and she says, "I want that photo you took."
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. In negative.
Yes. I didn't
He's
take
like, "Hey, public property. What are you doing?" So in that case, it's really just about getting it, because and it's about how you stage things, right? So like, I don't know if I would stage a complicated performance-based dialogue scene in the middle of Times Square, right? Or in the middle of LA, downtown LA, because you're going to have to be doing repeated takes and you're going to just call attention to yourself if you're not getting a permit. If you don't have a permit, if you're just I like to use this stuff for walkthroughs or like quick scenes or like stuff to really build it's like the connective points between two other scenes. And that way you sort of get a lot of scope, but you're not in a position where you're calling attention to yourself. Like, for example, in negative, we didn't have permission to shoot in Union Station. But what we did was we rode a train into Union Station. We walked out and I just had the camera right here. I said, "Just keep walking, do your thing." And I'm rolling. And if somebody caught me, well, they don't have any right to take any of my footage. All they can say is, "You have to leave." I said, "Okay." But I never got caught. Right. You just have to be really smart about it. And you have to know what you're shooting and how you're shooting it, and be strategic about how you're utilizing those kinds of things.
And just a second, another question.
Is there a specific scene you're thinking
Yeah,
about?
it's my movie's going to be a lot of basketball, and there's crowd in the crowd, and we have the principals and the talking in the bleachers kind of thing.
At like a sports stadium or something?
Yeah,
or
it's at a high school gym. In the high school gym.
Yes.
Yeah, and then we have, I'm a basketball coach, so I can get a lot of live environment if I needed to.
Right.
But just some legally sometimes comes up with some of the producers. They said you need to watch this, watch that.
Well, so yeah, I mean, look, there will always tell you there's legal issues. People will tell you, for example, you can't have trademark logos in your movie. Not true. You can put in as many trademarks as you want. Company has no legal standing to sue you. A trademark is not copyright, right? A trademark is preventing confusion among different brands. So if you're a movie featuring a logo, that's not creating confusion among Nike. People do it because they're just simpler. But, for example, the show Ballers with The Rock featured tons of NFL logos. The film Concussion featured the NFL shield and tons of team logos. The reason why, but they did not have to, the NFL did not approve that. And the reason why they were able to do it was because you can't claim, it's not copyright. Now, you can't put a painting up in a thing because that is copyrightable. So people will always go through the process of saying you legally can't do this. And yeah, a lot of times you want to protect yourself. In your case, what I would do is I would find a way to shoot your basketball game, you know, in shoot the wide shot, shoot the action, do that, and then either come back later and shoot your tight close-ups of your actors talking and just get a bunch of people around them, and you're shooting just close, right? And so that's how I would approach that. The key to that is when your actors are then talking, you got to make sure they're talking at the level that's appropriate for all that stuff going on, because sometimes they'll just talk normally and you're like, oh, this does not work. It doesn't match.
Right.
So yeah, I would try not to shoot that during a game because you're not gonna have good audio. It's gonna be very, very bad. But I think you could capture the game in reality and then just cut it in.
Right.
What about if you have kids?
Well, children, you know, any actor, like if they're acting, are you talking about just having kids appearing in the background?
The basketball scene was children.
Oh, with children. I mean,
under 18 kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that if they're not really identifiable, or like, you know, the other option is to get permission from the school and you put a plaque up and you say, we're filming. And if you don't want to be filmed, then don't come in. You know?
Right. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think because it's such a specific thing and you're not like just walking through a downtown and whatever, I think you do your best to get permission. I think, like, for example, when we were doing Mending the Line, there's this scene where the kids are playing football and, you know, on TV, and the clearance company came back and said, do you have like permission from each person? We're like, they're not identifiable. You tell me who is who.
Right.
Right. Like, so that's the other key is that person identifiable? So we didn't end up having to get that, but, yeah, I would just go about it and get permission and say, hey, I'm making a movie. If you're a basketball coach, you've got it in, you've got a connection there. And then I would just shoot it. I would shoot separate elements.
Thank you so much for that. And great work on Mending the Line.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Reno, on your film. Well,
thank
Josh,
you.
I just thank you. I am so grateful. Thank you so much. What an exciting interview and so much fun. And I think we really have to stay in touch because I think we really, really make a great team.
Absolutely.
And,
I love chatting about it, and happy to join you anytime.
Yes, it's great. And I could have talked to you for a lot longer, but we'll have to let you go.
No problem.
I'm afraid. So thank you so much for being here. I also just wanted to end by saying in 2 weeks, I'm teaching a class. I teach once a month. And this time I'm teaching one of my favorite classes, and it's called, Is My Script Good Enough?
Nice.
It's
a great question.
Would really be right what Josh would say to that. So I'd love to see you there. And then also in 2 weeks, when we do our next podcast, it's one of my clients, Chego Molech, who's a fabulous producer in South Africa. And so we'll be talking to her. And thank you, Emily, for taking care of everybody. Thanks, everybody, for coming. And thank you, Josh. Good luck with everything.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Josh.
Bye, Yinka. I love your hat.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great class.
Bye.